Good morning, everyone. I'm going to wait a couple of minutes. There's a lot of attendees, so I want to give people a chance to actually join, and we'll get started here in a few minutes. For those of you that have just joined, we're going to wait a couple of minutes because we have quite a few attendees today. So we want to give people an opportunity to log on. So we're going to probably start in about 2 minutes. Okay, we're going to get started. There's lots of information, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of questions. This was a very popular topic. Welcome to Optimum's webinar series. I'm Jill Thompson, the AVP of Underwriting. Just a couple of things. If you have any questions during the talk, please use the Q&A box and we'll get to them as soon as possible. We have some time at the end, and then any questions that are answered, we'll email you guys back the answers later on after the seminar. There will be a survey after the seminar. This helps us give you better content, different subjects. So we really appreciate it if you fill that out so that we can make it better the next time. And then everybody is on mute. There is you can chat with each other in the chat, but the questions, please put them in the Q&A. Just a couple of things and announcements. Optimum is hosting some fraternal or smaller client seminars in San Antonio, Chicago, and Pittsburgh next month. If you're interested in that, please email the info us@optimumre.com. Our seminar, we normally have a fall seminar. We're moving it to the spring. So In its place, we're putting a half-a-day webinar. We've got Dr. Green from Lincoln. We've got Dr. Mahajan from Principal, and of course our own Dr. J. We'll be doing the webinar in October. And then of course in March, we're going to do our in-person seminar. And then in August, we'll have a claims webinar with Michelle McAllister. So just look out for those, save the dates or the registrations. And without further ado, I'm going to introduce the doc. Dr. Minas Joannides started in private practice in pulmonary medicine in St. Petersburg, Florida, and he's worked for 3 other direct carriers before joining Optimum and about almost 2 years ago. Take it away, Doc.
Okay, well, thanks, Jill. Oh, I think somebody has their mic on. Obviously somebody with a sense of humor, because the talk today is going to be on Ozempic and the glucagon-like peptide-1 agonist weight loss drugs. A mouthful, right? So everybody's ready, we'll get started. So the agenda today is we're going to talk about sugar highs and sugar spikes. We're going to talk about optimal insulin and glucagon equilibrium, how glucagon-like peptide-1, GLP-1, we're going to talk a lot about that today, is different from glucagon, what agonist diabetes drugs simulate GLP-1 and why do they assist in weight loss, and there is no agony in an agonist drug. An agonist drug is just a drug that activates certain receptors. So it's really not a downer kind of word. It's just going to activate certain receptors. So all these drugs we're going to talk about today are agonists. And what are the additional benefits derived from these diabetes/weight loss drugs? So let's get started. So this is my favorite kind of sugar. I don't know what yours is. So if I'm drinking tea or coffee, I always like to use sugar. That's why the song that was playing is kind of interesting. So the perfect glucose level. If we're looking at levels of glucose in the body in terms of hazard ratios, you can see that it's about 80 plus, something in there is probably the ideal fasting serum glucose. And then as glucose goes up in the body, the risk goes up, as well as if it goes down a lot. So ideal is right there where the red arrow is. So that's kind of where we'd all like to be all the time, right? But we still do glucose tolerance tests, especially in pregnant women. And so what we do is we give them a load of glucose and we see how their body responds, and we take blood samples both at the fasting point and then at 1 hour, 2 hours, and 3 hours. So for a typical glucose tolerance test, we give 75 grams of glucose. So that orange drink there at the bottom. There is more of a glucose challenge. You can use 50, but that's not the ideal glucose tolerance test. And you can see in some people that have gestational diabetes, that's the red line. When they're challenged with a load of glucose like this, 75 grams, their blood sugars go up. And in pregnancy, obviously, you want to monitor the blood sugar very carefully. And if somebody has gestational diabetes, they may require insulin or whatever to maintain ideal glucose levels, because you don't want the baby exposed to elevated glucose levels. So that's the glucose tolerance test, and the challenge is dumping all that glucose into the system, like 75 grams. So there are lovers and haters of Coca-Cola. And the reason I'm even bringing Coca-Cola up is in a 12-ounce can of Coca-Cola, regular Coke, there's 39 grams of sugar. So if you took a 1.5 cans of, or 1 2/3 cans of Coke, it's almost like a glucose tolerance test. Now, Warren Buffett, who's been drinking it all his life, he's done pretty well. He said he wished he'd had a twin, and the twin had eaten broccoli his entire life. And Warren says, I know I would have been happier and think the odds are I would have lived longer. I think it's a marvelous product. Then on the other side, there are people that have practical uses for Coke, like plumbing, etc., but they're not too enthusiastic about drinking all that sugar. So we're going to talk about high and low glycemic foods. So what foods do we eat that really shoot the glucose level up like in a spike? And if you look at the chart on the left, see the red line, those foods that are right under the red hump, like chips, biscuits, cakes, ice cream, dates, potatoes, processed food, watermelon, white bread, they're high glycemic foods. So they spike the glucose levels very early after eating them. Whereas other foods kind of release sugars more slowly. So they're low glycemic foods. And the way to remember this is there's actually a mountain in Rio de Janeiro in Brazil called Sugarloaf, by chance, related to our glycemic foods. And it's that pointed mountain that you see in the picture. And then the other mountain in front of it is more modified. It's not quite as peaked. So that's kind of where we want to shoot for with the foods that we eat. We don't want that spike like in Sugarloaf. We want the more modest, slower release sugars when we eat foods. That works better in the body. So now I'm really no fun. So don't invite me to a party because I can ruin it in 15 minutes. So I'll always bring up the negative aspects of things. So nutritional DEFCON 1 is Ben & Jerry's peanut butter cup ice cream. And DEFCON 1 is the worst. That means high alert, things are bad. And the reason is that I'm bringing it up here is if you look at the nutritional facts, 2/3 of a cup of Ben & Jerry's peanut butter cup ice cream, which is the size down at the bottom on the right compared to a tomato, that's the size of 2/3 of a cup. That has 460 calories, 90% saturated fat for the day, your total carbohydrates, including added sugars at 52%. So you can see some foods are really going to shoot up the glucose levels in your body. So that's a concern, and we're going to talk more about that. So when we look at hemoglobin A1C, hemoglobin's in the red cells, and glycohemoglobin is when the glucose attaches to the hemoglobin, and high A1Cs have more glucose attached, right? And it's kind of a goopy, toxic substance, really, and the body really does not like a lot of glucose floating around in the system. It has inflammatory effects on the body, and things don't work quite as well. And that's why we have all the diseases that are related to diabetes. High blood sugars are negative on all the body's functioning. So one other fact to keep an eye on, if you ever have really low A1Cs, like super low, it's not related to this talk, but you always want to be sure that they don't have a hemoglobinopathy, and that's one of the reasons you may be getting false readings on the A1C. Anyway, so probably at some point in time, we're all going to be wearing glucose monitoring watches to try to reduce glucose spikes, because I think we'll find out as time goes on that really has a negative effect on our health. And if we can limit those spikes and have a more modest elevation of sugars after we eat. It will do better in the long term. So when you eat a meal, it's probably better to eat the protein and veggies first, then eat carbs. This slows the glucose spike and kind of smooths, like in the picture of Sugarloaf versus the other mountain. And the glucose uptake is over a longer period, and avoid carbs alone. Like I said, I'm no fun. So that's just the way things are with me. So I'm going to talk about insulin and glucagon and the delicate balance in your body and your applicants of how to balance how much, what the level of glucose is in the system. So when in the fed state, when glucose levels are high, then more insulin is secreted to try to get that under control. If for some reason an applicant was hypoglycemic, the body would have more glucagon to help raise the blood sugar. So insulin and glucagon are kind of balancing each other out to try to get an equilibrium and a homeostasis where the condition in the body holds steady. So seems like I'm kind of long-winded here. When am I going to actually start talking about the drugs? But we need this background in order to kind of have a base for how we're going to think about the drugs we're going to talk about today. So it's this insulin-glucagon balance. So if you ever go on a cruise, your pancreas is working overtime to balance the glucose level. As I said, you really don't have to worry about any glucagon causing the blood sugar to go up, because you're going to get plenty from all the foods you're eating, the drinks you're drinking, and people do tend to overeat, and so your poor little pancreas is kind of trying to manage the system when you overindulge like this. So the pancreas has two types of cells that we're interested in today: the beta cells, which secrete the insulin, and the alpha cells, which secrete the glucagon. So the pancreas is kind of buried back in the retroperitoneal area behind all the other organs in the abdomen, and it tries to manage and maintain homeostasis as best it can. Obviously, in some people, they don't have enough beta cells, so there's not enough insulin, or there's insulin resistance for one reason or another. So glucagon, I just thought this was an interesting thing to show that instead of floating around usually as individual fibrils, it actually kind of packages itself and moves around in a zippered raft. And we got this from MIT. Just kind of an interesting way to understand how the body manages certain elements that are needed for our homeostasis, and this is one of them. So these glucagon fibrils are zippered in a raft. So glucagon versus what we're going to talk about today, which is glucagon-like peptide 1 and drugs that are imitating glucagon-like peptide 1. So we just saw that glucagon raises blood sugar when the blood sugar is low, if you're hypoglycemic. However, glucagon-like peptide 1 causes release of insulin to lower blood sugar. So it's acting more like insulin that we just talked about, right? So it causes release of insulin. So they share some similarities, and both are split off of a polypeptide, which is called pre-proglucagon. It cleaves into many hormones, but glucagon and glucagon-like peptide 1 have different actions on the glucose equilibrium. So they probably could have chosen a better name to distinguish the two, since it seems like it's confusing. But we're going to talk about them today in depth, and I think you'll have a handle on what the glucagon-like peptide 1 actually does. So it's 30 to 31 amino acids, and it's involved in glucose homeostasis by inducing more insulin release. So that's GLP-1. So the body makes this long peptide. It has beneficial effects on the vascular endothelial cells. So it's not just affecting blood sugar and insulin release, but has other valuable qualities that help the body. And it actually reduces the risk of cardiovascular events. So it decreases blood pressure, it improves microvascular function, and it reduces inflammation in the body. So a lot of other benefits of GLP-1. And it also has a neuroprotective effect by inhibiting neuroinflammation. So if you were able to create a substance like glucagon, like peptide 1, and administer that to applicants, that should be a very positive and advantageous thing. So that's what drug companies have done. They have imitated GLP-1 hormone, and these drugs are imitator agonist drugs, and we're going to talk about those a lot today. So if a medicine is to imitate GLP-1, it's called an agonist, and it needs to bind something in the body to have an effect. And in this case, it binds a GLP-1 receptor. So these drugs that we're going to talk about today all bind a GLP receptor in the body. They cause the body to release more insulin to control blood sugar and type 2 diabetes. And they also cause increased feeling of fullness after eating meals. And that's the benefit we're also going to talk about today, which helps with weight loss. So, you know, when you think about it, with all these benefits of GLP-1s, what's not to love, right? Everything that it seems to do seems to be favorable in terms of our good health. So pick an organ system, and it seems to be a very beneficial kind of a thing. So if we could add more of it to our system, it seems like we would have a lot more benefits, right? So it has, if you look at the heart, it has cardiovascular protection, anti-inflammatory action, reduces myocardial ischemic injury, endothelial dysfunction. If you look at the GI tract, it decreases gastric emptying, which helps with that feeling of fullness. It helps in the pancreas with increased insulin secretion. It helps in the liver, and it even helps in the brain with better memory, decreased neuroinflammation. I mean, what is not to love about them, right? So that's why drug companies have imitated GLP-1 with their drugs that they've released. So they've genetically engineered these GLP-1 agonist drugs. And the two that we're going to talk a lot about today are the semaglutide, which is what Ozempic and Wegovy is. And we're also going to talk about tirzepatide, which is what Mounjaro is. So these are the two main categories that really have taken the world by storm for people that want to have better control of diabetes and control of weight loss. So semaglutide is a GLP-1 agonist, and it's very similar in structure. Size-wise, it's about 31 amino acids, and we said the GLP-1 was about that size. It's an agonist of glucagon-like peptide 1 receptors, so it hits the target just like GLP-1 does. And it has a role as a hypoglycemic agent, anti-obesity agent, neuroprotective agent, and appetite depressant. So it kind of has all the features that we're looking for to help with somebody that wants to have weight loss, right? It decreases other things, like it helps with hypertension, problems with lipids, liver, and it should improve mortality with all these beneficial features. It helps people with their appetite, and as we know from what's been reported, body weight is decreased, and not just a little bit, but significantly in people that have effectively utilized these drugs. So here's a comparison chart just to kind of give you an idea of what we're talking about here. As you'll notice, I've circled Ozempic, Rybelsus, Wegovy, and at the bottom, Mounjaro, which is the different kind of drug. And so Ozempic, Rybelsus, and Wegovy are all the same drug, semaglutide. Ozempic and Wegovy are injectables, and Rybelsus is an oral tablet. And right now, there's still discussion on whether insurance companies are going to approve which or any for things other than diabetes. So will any of these, pass muster and be approved by, an insurance company for weight loss? The Rybelsus as an oral drug would seem to be, better because administration is easier. But as we'll see later, when you take that drug, there's very little bioavailable drug in the tablet because the body seems to enzymatically change the amount of drug that's necessary. So that's why most people have relied on the injectables, which seem to work quite well. So those semaglutides are at the top, and then at the bottom, Mounjaro is a tirzepatide, which also is injectable. The injectables are like once weekly, and the Rybelsus is a daily tablet. So it's big business, as you may have heard. The drug companies are in fierce competition with each other. It's kind of they're fighting to the death on who's going to win out and have the best drug available. Obviously, people that are requiring an injectable, that adds to the difficulty for some. So that's why they're all searching for an oral drug. But, the injectables are very popular right now. So they're marketed as pens, and each one has its own specific instructions. And people need to be very cautious and careful when they read the instructions so they're administering it correctly, because you could easily mess up the administration and not get the full effects that you were desiring. Just for example, Ozempic has a shelf life of about 8 weeks. You initially keep it in the refrigerator, but when you start using it, you can keep it just at room temperature as long as the room is not greater than 86 degrees. On the left upper, I have an indication of where you would inject the drug, in the arms, abdomen, the big muscles, or the big portions of the leg. And they use, the company that markets Ozempic uses a very tiny needle, which they patented and market. It's really super fine. It's as thin as 2 human hairs, so it's really tiny. And you really need to watch a video if you're going to use this or any of the other injectables, because you need to know exactly how to set this up and what dose you need to use. And then when you inject it, you need to count up to 5 or 6 to make sure that the injection was adequate. So it really is a little more complex than some people think. So the instructions are critical in order to get the benefit that you're expecting. None are cheap. This is just from Amazon. Obviously, most people want their insurance company to pay for these, but you can see I just picked these particular doses out. For Wegovy, it was $1,618. Ozempic was $915. Mounjaro was, it's not really in the bottle like it shows there, but it's an injectable. That's $1,000, and Rybelsus is 912. Again, insurance companies are going to balk at paying for some of these for weight loss, and they will possibly approve them for diabetes, but it's going to depend on which insurance company, what this situation is. Obviously, a lot of people with a lot of money can just afford to pay outright, and they're not worrying about insurance companies. So, Ozempic dosing schedule requires attention to details. It's very exacting, and it's not magic because you still have to, participate in a diet and exercise. So I don't think you want to challenge diners, drive-ins, and dives and then think that Ozempic is going to solve the problem. So it requires you starting on a small dose and then working your way up to whatever your doctor thinks is appropriate. So you may stay at one dose on a weekly basis for the first 4 weeks, then go up to 0.5 milligrams for the next 4 weeks, then switch to different strength pens and use those for whatever your doctor prescribes as the amount of time on those pens. And finally, you'll land at a dose which is both sufficient for you and not causing any problems, and hopefully weight loss is achieved if that's what the situation might be, or the diabetes is controlled. So just for Ozempic, just to give you an idea, you really need to know what strength you're buying. So because there are 3 different pre-filled pens, so it really is a matter of knowing what's going on. So that's why people that aren't really aware, they're borrowing somebody else's pen or they're using their spouse's pen or whatever, you can, if you don't have follow the instructions of your own personal physician and use them appropriately, there could be problems. So that's why it's important that people use these appropriately. And if you do hear that bad things are happening with people who have used Ozempic, you need to know the background. Did they use it? Did they use the right dose appropriately as prescribed? So Ozempic, being that GLP-1 imitator, it stimulates insulin secretion, it lowers glucagon secretion, and it delays gastric emptying. So it does the things that we're hoping it would do to imitate GLP-1. And this is just to give you an idea. This is from the company that makes it. It's a 94% exact sequence of human GLP-1. So we said it's what the drug companies wanted to do is imitate human GLP-1. And so Ozempic did a good job. So it's basically only has 3 modifications at the places you see on the molecule. So it's very close to a human GLP-1. So that's why you get the benefit, and it acts just like a human GLP-1 hormone. So they were pretty clever in designing this. And what this shows, and it may be a little hard to figure out, but over to the left is the mean insulin secretion rate on the y-axis, okay? At the bottom is the plasma glucose level. What this is showing is that people that have taken Ozempic for 12 weeks have a response as a normal, healthy person has in terms of insulin secretion. So that's a good thing. So that's the greenish line and the red line. Below are people when they start Ozempic, the kind of the gold line, and that's also the placebo. And it shows you that they don't have quite as good of an insulin secretion. So this is just kind of underscoring that Ozempic really helps people's system act as just as a healthy person would be in response to a sugar load with an insulin response. So are they magic? Are these drugs, magic? They're doing the things that the normal human hormones do, but they're giving you an extra boost. So you get all those good things that we talked about. You get reduction of neuroinflammation, promoting nerve growth, improved heart function, suppressing appetite, delaying gastric emptying, regulating lipid metabolism, and reducing fat deposition. So perfect. That's what we're looking for. So with all these good effects, I mean, we even might want to think about credits in underwriting if combined with prudent diet and exercise and a demonstration that the person is losing weight. As it may sound, are these too good to be true? So you need to watch out for any scams, fake drugs, people that market things, or if you're buying Ozempic over the internet, all these kind of things might take away from the actual beauty and benefit of the drugs. So, if you hear bad press, got to watch out and see what's actually going on. So the GLP-1 analogs on the studies that have been done have also exhibited a lower all-cause mortality as well as hemoglobin A1C reduction in patients with type 2 diabetes. So that's good. There are reports that some people who take Ozempic and similar GLP-1 agonists may also lose their desire to drink alcohol if they chronically had a desire to drink, maybe somewhat to excess. So for some reason, these drugs have an effect where people don't desire alcohol, which is another positive benefit. People have noted that they have a reduced desire to participate in addictive behaviors. So it may even help people that have addictions like gambling, which seems pretty far afield from managing glucose and food intake. And also people have reported that they don't think about food as much when they're on these drugs. So if they were, say, they normally would have certain foods in their diet that they needed every day because they just had kind of an addiction for those particular things, like you had to have a taco at a certain time of the day. Some people don't seem to have that same noise, it was called food noise, that requires you to go out and do something that you do normally every day. Now, I do see some questions. Jill, is there something that we should take up now?
I was just gonna wait until the end if that's okay, unless you want to start answering some of them.
No, we can wait. We'll wait. So I may answer some of those questions as we go along. So it may be better that way. So I'll keep moving. So Novo Nordisk is the company that makes Ozempic and Wegovy. Those are the two biggies that were out there, and it's located, at least the headquarters is, pardon me, is located in Copenhagen, Denmark. So they're also looking at possibly new drugs like oral drugs that would help to control appetite and help with diabetes. So you may say, well, I've never heard of them. They've been around for a long time. So this is their 100-year anniversary. They started producing insulin in Scandinavia in 1923, so a long time ago. So they've been on the ball here, and they came out with Ozempic and Wegovy. So it's been a long time coming, but they're really active in research in terms of diabetes. And you can see the gentleman at the bottom, his last name is Hagedorn, and in 1946, he was instrumental in the production of neutral protamine Hagedorn insulin called NPH. You've probably heard of that. And so this company's been at this a long, long time. So it's not some fly-by-night company that came up with these drugs. These are people that have dedicated their lives and careers to trying to help people with diabetes. And what a boon to come out with something that also reduces weight. I mean, that's fantastic. So that's Mr. or Dr. Hagedorn right there. And that starch collar must have been tough working. So we talked about Ozempic. What about Wegovy? That's the other Novo Nordisk drug. Now this one is even more complicated with 5 different type pens, which are taken for different periods of time. So, I mean, you really have to know what you're doing in order to get the dose straight. And to try to get to the maximum dose may take, 17 weeks. So it's not like an overnight kind of a thing. So hopefully when we look at applications and the applicants are taking these drugs, they're doing it appropriately and following the directions and like advancing as recommended and not kind of jumping from one to the other without a plan, so to speak. So it's pretty complex. Okay, what are the downside risks? So some people just cannot take these because they have GI side effects. So they're nauseated, vomiting, diarrhea, constipated, queasy, acid reflux. So some people are out right from the get-go. And it would be probably pretty quick that you would know it just doesn't work for you. People that stop taking the drugs can have rebound weight gain. It's probably not a good idea in pregnant women or breastfeeding, at least at this point. Maybe it will be allowed at a later time. It's not intended for diabetes type 1 or if you have retinopathy. Not good in renal insufficiency or failure. And, it's been reported that you shouldn't take it if you have a family history of medullary thyroid cancer or multiple endocrine neoplasia. But so far that's only applied to rats. As far as we know. Pancreatitis may be related to people that take this, but that's questionable still. If somebody has gastroparesis and they already have delayed emptying of their stomach, they probably don't want to take something that's going to increase that delay in emptying. And if somebody's anorexic or has an eating disorder or unexplained weight loss, I don't think you'd want them taking this at the same time as well. So I would expect some bad press, even if these drugs remain free of substantial side effects. Somebody somewhere is going to have complaints about them. And if you stop the drug, weight gain is likely to occur. So it's not the fault of the drug. The drug is designed to do a certain thing. And if you're taking it, that's what hopefully it does. But if you stop taking it, then it doesn't do it. So I don't think we can blame the drug if you have rebound weight gain. And then there may be illicit or adulterated drugs with adverse outcomes that kind of cloud the issue. Obviously, you don't want to share needles or pens with people in your family or other people, and you have to follow directions and take the correct dose, right? I mean, just as we would expect. So whenever somebody says to me, oh, I read an article that the sweetener for my coffee causes cancer, I bring this cartoon out that I've had for quite a while. And, lab rodents need to take care of anything that's they're subjected to because it's usually a bad outcome. So anything can have side effects. So now, let's say we have a GLP-1 drug and we're just really happy about the weight loss that's been achieved. Well, somebody has to go one step better, right? So that's what happened with Mounjaro. And Eli Lilly was able to develop an agonist drug that not only has the GLP-1 advantages, but also has what's called glucose-dependent insulinotropic polypeptide that will also assist in other features. So it's kind of like a GLP-1 that's been juiced. So it combines both a GIP, that's that long glucose-dependent insulinotropic polypeptide, and the GLP-1 receptor agonism that we talked about before. So this even does more. So I won't go into great detail, but virtually every good thing that can possibly happen to your body, this drug seems to have a beneficial effect on. So it affects both what the GLP-1 receptors affect in a beneficial way, as well as what GIP does. And so this was, really Eli Lilly's, it may be the category killer for injectables, and it's tirzepatide. And it does both of these actions that I just mentioned. So you may synergistically get even greater weight reduction than achieved with just a GLP-1 receptor agonist. That's what that monoagonism means. So the results that have been found so far with people that use Mounjaro have been truly amazing. Not that the Ozempic hasn't, but the majority of participants reach 10 to 20% weight loss targets with a 10 milligram or 15 milligram dose. So if you can imagine your insurance block, your life block, and applicants that you already took that now decided to get some weight loss, reached a 10 to 20% weight loss target. I mean, truly amazing if they continue to take the drug and they work effectively. So there's a lot of business going on here, but just bear with me for a minute. At the bottom, we'll show the color for each dosing that was used with this drug, Mounjaro. 5 milligrams, 10 milligrams, the darker blue is 15 milligrams, and placebo. So if you look at the chart and you look to the y-axis is the percentage of participants. So this is important, so you kind of carry away how good this drug is. If you'll notice, 96, I think it's 96% of people that used the 10 or 15 milligram dose a week had greater than 5% weight loss. That's significant right there. If you look at the second group of bars, greater than 10% weight reduction, greater than or equal to, 85.9 to 90% of people had 10% or greater weight loss reduction. That's kind of amazing. People that had greater or equal to 15% weight loss was between 73 and 78, it looks like. That's pretty amazing too. And then 62.9% had a greater than 20% weight loss, and almost 40% had a greater than 25% weight loss. I mean, it's pretty hard to get those kind of numbers from any drug, but I mean, this is kind of truly amazing findings from this drug. I think we belabored the numbers enough, so I'll skip this one. So the 15 milligram group met those really great numbers, and there were no adverse side effects with the 15 versus the 10 milligram dose. So it really conferred additional benefits without any added safety concerns. And all these drugs seem to have a very good risk profile. Other than those side effects we talked about before, which were the GI things initially, I mean, people are not having problems, and even people that don't have diabetes that take the drugs don't appear to have any problems with hypoglycemia. In other words, the drug helps with weight loss, but doesn't adversely affect the blood sugar level in people that don't have diabetes. So just all in all, the results were pretty amazing, and it had all the other beneficial features that we talked about before. So cardiovascular improvement, metabolic improvement, waist circumference improvement, systolic and diastolic blood pressure improvement. And the reduction in fat mass was 3 times greater than the reduction in lean mass, which is kind of what you want. You want to lose the fat, not the muscle, right? So pretty amazing findings and beneficial effects greater than even they may have expected in all other kind of categories besides just weight loss and diabetes control. So, unless this is my personal opinion, but unless some new hazard arises with these kind of drugs, I view a case pretty favorably and not negatively. So I don't go hunting for whether this person has diabetes if they happen to be on one of these drugs. If things seem to be fine in terms of A1Cs on the labs that we get, I don't go digging deeper to see if they occultly forgot to tell us they had, taken diabetes medications in the past. A lot of people are just going to take this for the weight loss. The only way I get concerned is and we did have a case recently where a person was a senior citizen who had weight loss, and they had some other chronic illnesses. And so it wasn't clear whether Ozempic was playing a role or not, but I would get more concerned about those kind of cases where weight loss isn't necessarily a good thing in certain people who apply, especially for large amounts, right? So I would be cautious in that kind of category, but other people, it may be a very favorable factor when you consider a case. Now, just briefly, as I said, everybody is hot to trot on, getting the next drug, and especially finding an oral drug. So it's going to be, all out war to see who gets the oral drug that's going to advance the equation and hopefully avoid the injectables, which, as I said, can be kind of complex. So Pfizer is working on a drug, as I mentioned before. So Novo Nordisk is Ozempic and Wegovy. Eli Lilly is the Mounjaro. Pfizer is they were working on 2 drugs, and one of them kind of pooped out because it raises liver function studies. So the one that's still in the mix is the DANUGLIPRON. That one is still in studies to see if it will work as an oral drug. Lilly is also working on an oral drug. We have to thank Jean-Marc for getting me this today. They're also working on a drug that can be taken orally, and it doesn't have to be taken fasting, which Rybelsus has to be taken fasting. So hopefully they'll come out with something that also works in an oral form. If you look at the very bottom, in something like Rybelsus with semaglutide, only 1% of the tablet is actually bioavailable. In other words, you have to take a pretty whopping dose for the drug to actually get into the system. So these new drugs that Lilly and Pfizer are working on hopefully don't require that kind of dose, and they don't have the same properties as a peptide like we've been talking about. So they're not, you don't have to worry about whether you take it with or without food, that kind of thing. And the studies are still ongoing. So I just want to mention another category, which you all are well aware of, that also has very beneficial effects in addition to treating in addition to treating type 2 diabetes, and that is the sodium glucose cotransporter 2 inhibitors. Another mouthful, right? The SGLT2 inhibitors. And these are things like Farxiga, Jardiance, Invokana. And what happens is it helps the body get rid of glucose in the urine. So they pee out, huge amounts of glucose, which lowers the body glucose level, right? So, as they've been studying, what they have found out is that these also have other great protective effects in addition to treating the diabetes. And these include cardioprotective effects and are being used in early congestive heart failure. So there's something about some of these drugs that not only do they do what they were designed to do, but they have these other beneficial qualities that we're finding. Now, the downside of these drugs is that, especially in females, they can get genital mycotic infections and urinary tract infections, that kind of thing. So it's not all sweetness and light, but very powerful and helpful drugs. So, we want to, I guess, eat healthy. So be Scandinavian and have a little seafood salad with some shrimp on top and some garden micro greens and a few little flowers there. So I guess that's the toast for the day is we're all going to eat a little healthy. And our takeaways today. So these new drugs may offer applicants a new way to achieve ideal or close to ideal body weight. To date, the side effects appear to be minimal. There appear to be benefits from these drugs in addition to the weight loss and A1C control. Applicants need to follow the directions carefully. And of course, if you ever have any questions on a case, say you have a case and you're not sure exactly how the drugs are either helping or clouding the situation, we're always here at Optimum Re to give you a hand and give our opinion if you ever need it. So our symbol of the company is the Nautilus. So it's one of nature's oldest creatures to survive in the ocean, and it's a symbol of grace in growth, expansion, and renewal, and a symbol of order amidst chaos as reflected in its spiral precision. So, Jill, what do we have to discuss?
Do all of these affect people with a history of pancreatitis?
Well, the pancreatitis is still a little sketchy, but right now they're recommending people that have pancreatitis don't take it. As I said, it's still a little early, but you probably wouldn't be prescribed it, or if an applicant has pancreatitis and they're on that drug, that might be something you might be a little concerned about. So it's a relative contraindication at this point in time. Maybe in the future we'll know more about that.
Gotcha. You might not know about this, but we've had a couple of people say, like, when will the price go down? How long does it usually take for prices to get reasonable?
No, it's true. Well, it's going to take a while for any of these to come off a patent. So, I don't expect that price is going to come down. Maybe if the companies release enough different new ones and they get to be oral drugs, maybe. But I doubt it in the initial time frame we're dealing with now. And plus, as with everything, people that have a lot of money throw their weight around and they're able to get it at the expense of people that probably need these drugs to treat their diabetes. So that's, that's always a problem. So I would say that the prices are probably not going to come down. Hopefully, people that are at a certain BMI may eventually qualify for the use as a weight loss drug, and people that have diabetes hopefully could get these drugs to treat their diabetes and also get the benefit of the weight loss, which would be beautiful. So hopefully there's a way to get it through whatever insurance that you have. But that's still kind of up in the air right now. I don't have a lot of great details on that, like with what's Medicare going to do or any of those kind of things. So I'm not sure yet, but I think in the population that we see, like the insurance population, there's probably a lot of people that won't mind spending the money to somehow gain access to these.
Yeah, like you said, we had one the other day where it's like they were not overweight. They were not a diabetic, and it's like they took it. It's like weight loss.
That's
Weight loss.
right. Yeah, that's right.
How often is this type of drug being offered to patients without diabetes, or like for the pre-diabetics? You know how some of them will be put on, metformin, when they're pre-diabetic. Is this something that they would do, or that this is medically, available for people?
Yeah, well, I would imagine that, let's say somebody's pre-diabetic, the chances are they're probably not ideal body weight. I mean, I'm just guessing. For type 2 diabetes, they probably have insulin resistance, and, they may be a little overweight. So I think the doctor may initiate it earlier now because they know all the benefits that these drugs can provide. So instead of using metformin, if somebody had any evidence of being overweight and, pre-diabetic, this would be an option to kind of handle both problems. So I could see that, it may be something that's useful in that regard. However, as you know, metformin is a whole lot cheaper. So, people still may be using that in that kind of a situation.
And you did say that this will raise the glycosuria in the urine, correct?
That's the drug group that I mentioned at the end. And so that's only applies to these sodium glucose coast
Like
transporter
the
2.
Jardians and stuff.
So
Okay.
that's only the Jardians, the Farxiga, and so whenever I see like a lab, like a CRL or an exam 1 glucose level in the urine and it's super high, I kind of secondarily go looking for whether they're on one of these drugs, because they usually are. And that's how the drug is actually working. It's just dumping all that glucose into the urine. So that's why, you get those super high glucose readings in the urine.
Gotcha.
It doesn't apply.
Ozempic and Manjaro don't.
It doesn't, this doesn't apply to any of those GLP-1 drugs. Sorry if there's any confusion about that. Yeah, this is a different group. But I wanted you to be aware that not only are these Ozempic type drugs have other beneficial qualities, but things like this sodium glucose transporter 2 inhibitors, they're being used for, as I said, early congestive heart failure. Like, who would have ever thought that would be something that a diabetes drug that dumps glucose into the urine would be helpful with, right? I mean, it's amazing. So a lot of the new drugs that are coming have all these other beneficial qualities, that it'll be very helpful in the future.
How long do you anticipate before you hear more of side effects? How long before, the next shoe drops or something? Like,
yeah, hard to predict, but so far so good. It's pretty amazing that there haven't
Ozempic has been
been.
out about a year or so. Is that?
I don't know the time, because I'm actually late to the party myself. I wasn't really following these, and then all of a sudden I said, I think I need to investigate because I'm hearing good things. So I can't tell you exactly the time frame, but they've been out for a while. And I would have thought that by now, at least, there would have been some indication that there's a problem. But anything can happen, and there may be something that falls out later that these cause some particular additional problem.
They
But
might
so
not.
far so good. And the fact that they don't cause hypoglycemia in people that aren't diabetic, yet you get all the benefits, is pretty amazing.
Now, I can anticipate, a lot of people going and asking their doctor, and there being shortages. I mean, because there's been other, diabetic drugs that I know that, that are hard to get because, either where they're manufactured or how long they, does this take a long time to manufacture? Is this, have you heard or seen anything about shortages?
Oh, I think there are problems with getting it in certain areas, and it's, as I said, it's kind of because the people with the cash, are able to purchase it without any worrying about, insurance issues. So, the money will flow to get whatever they want. So I think there probably will be, shortages, or it'll be difficult to get. And hopefully that will be resolved soon. Believe me, the drug companies want to sell as much of this stuff as they can. If it's $1,000 a month, you can imagine they're having a lot of meetings on how they can produce more real quick. So, those are the kind of drugs that are billion-dollar boons to
Yeah.
drug companies.
They're
So
not gonna be in a great big huge hurry for their patents to go bad.
that's right.
Expire.
Yeah, they have whatever number of years before these run out, so they're going to be pumping it out as fast as they can. But you can imagine the demand right now, because a lot of people have a BMI that would help to have one of these drugs. So
Well, I mean, if it helps, I mean, I mean, you would think that health insurance would be considering it, since, a lot of people's problems are caused by weight. So you would think that
that's right.
they'd want to fix that a bit. Somebody asked, how come some people have really bad effects like vomiting, even with fasting in the morning, even with low doses? Is it like specific types of people that have these side effects?
Yeah, I don't know anything about that. I know that one of my wife's relatives tried to use it, and he just couldn't take it because he had GI side effects, and he really could have benefited from it. So, I mean, it really must have been significant enough that he wasn't able to use it. So I don't know what the underlying causes. I guess you could try, if one didn't work, say the Ozempic didn't work, maybe you could try Manjaro. And these other drugs that are coming along, these oral, they have a completely different profile. So maybe you could take one of those, even though you couldn't take Ozempic.
Yeah, I mean, it's
So
just like some people can take metformin and some people absolutely cannot.
yeah, so it just depends. But I can't tell you like who would be the most likely to have a problem and who wouldn't. So I'm sure people are trying it. And but even with that, we haven't heard like, terrible reports of, huge
Kidney
numbers of people,
failure or something like that. Yeah.
or that can't take it. We haven't heard like huge numbers that can't take it. It's still like a measured number, considering all the people that are probably trying to get their hands on it right now. So I hope I've answered everybody's question. If you have more, as Jill said, please send them in. What we're trying to do here at Optimum is provide you with information for the things that you're interested in. So we're always happy to, develop talks that fit your needs, and that's what we're here for.
And what we'll do is we'll take the rest of these questions. I mean, because there's quite a bit, and I know we've gone over quite a bit. And we'll send them out, and we'll also send out a survey at the end. So if you have any questions, you can also answer them there. If you have anything that you'd like to contribute, you can send it to info.us@optimumre.com. Remember to look for our seminars and our other webinars coming in. Oh, I guess we're at 11:30. Sorry, Doc. I'm thinking we're at it just an hour. I should pay attention to the time. Let's see. How effective is GLP-1 agonist in terms of treating diabetes compared to other diabetic meds like metformin?
Yeah, working very well. So it has the beneficial qualities. I don't know that I could tell you exactly percentage wise which one treats the diabetes better, but I would probably go with these new drugs because of all their beneficial effects. So metformin just doesn't carry with it all the benefits that these drugs do. So
are they prescribing them together with like metformin and other
that
medications?
that I can't tell you, not being a diabetologist or endocrinologist, but that's a good question that I could research that one and let you know.
Yeah, I was gonna say, some people here are asking you, are you ready to prescribe it? Are you taking requests?
Yeah, no, and as I said, even though you have a great desire, make sure that like your personal physician is in charge, that, don't, if they start advertising on TV that you can do it over the internet or something, please don't do that. Make sure that your doctor thinks it's right for you, and then that they know all your other basic underlying conditions, so that it's used kind of in combination with whatever else you need or works for you. So, but I'm sure that there will be doctors who will, kind of like set up shop to market this. So I would just be careful, and that's where the bad news will come from. That people weren't carefully selected, or they took it for the wrong reason, or whatever. So it's a great drug, but as you know, we can always, make something that's very good something very bad if we don't use it correctly. So I'd be cautious.
And then it's not intended for retinopathy. Can it cause or expedite it? Is that why? Do you know why it's not?
It's just one of the contraindications right now, that if you have retinopathy, you're not supposed to use it, but I don't know that it makes it worse. And I don't know the circumstances why that contraindication is there. But when I was looking up all the negative things that or reasons that you wouldn't want to use it, that was one of them. So I included that. But that's another good one I can look into and get back to you with an answer.
And then have they tested this on type 1? I mean, is there a reason why they don't like Wegovy on for like a type 1 diabetic?
Yeah, well, type 1 diabetes, people have more of an absolute lack of insulin. So taking a medicine to try to boost your pancreas's production of insulin is not going to work out for you. So that's why you wouldn't want to use it in a type 1 diabetic. So this is more for people that have either insulin resistance or sluggish release of insulin from the cells in the pancreas. And that's why these drugs kind of work. Now, you also, depending on what other drugs you might be on for diabetes, and as I said, I'm not a specialist in that area. That might qualify, like what combination of things are available to you in addition to these drugs. So that's where your doctor can help you, advise you on, like, okay, we could use Mounjaro in this situation, but in your case, it may not be advisable because, and then they would tell you why.
They would give you. And then, some of the information that you gave is just anecdotal, where there's, some people that have said, are they going to test, or have they started testing for like alcohol and addictive behaviors being treated with this?
Well, that's a good question. Yeah, what I did was I tried to get the most current info that I could. So I've been reading the New York Times and other newspapers and journals, and these were like recently reported findings. So I don't have any like detailed studies of who this might work on, but people that are taking the drugs are reporting these things to their doctor, and the doctors are saying, hey, I just want to let everybody know that such and such, like my patient told me they don't have food noise anymore. And so to them, that was a big deal, because they don't need their 10 a.m. taco or whatever the case might be. Or they've just noticed that they don't have a need to, whatever their addictive personality was, it seems to be at least better than it used to be. But I don't have any data on whether you could actually give it to a person that has a gambling issue or some other kind of addictive personality.
Well, and there might be a little placebo thing, and it's like, if you hear that it helps, that might be helpful too.
And expensive placebo, but it's possible.
There's lots of people that have expensive habits. How do you feel about these drugs versus older known drugs like phentermine, or for weight loss, or some of the other drugs that have been taken in the past?
Yeah, those have been around for a long time, and these are actually much better. These have all the beneficial qualities. So I would think that most people are going to opt. Now, we do know of somebody who's taking phentermine and some other drug as, you know, that's what their doctor's prescribing, and obviously it's much cheaper. But, you know, these drugs, I mean, these are like the amazing things that have all the beneficial qualities. So I think if you were to choose one amongst phentermine and all the others that we just talked about, you would go with this group. So I would imagine that those will lose their appeal and people will kind of push them to the side in the future because there's so much investigative work being done on these new drugs that are working so well.
Well, yeah, and then, there have been some bad side effects when you mix with other things that we know about the phentermine. So,
Right. Yeah. Well, I used to
but we
do
don't know
structured.
about these yet.
Yeah, I used to do structured supplements, and we had the fen, you know, the PHEN, FEN cases where people had valve disease after taking those. Phentermine doesn't do that by itself, but still, it's probably not as useful as these drugs that I just talked about, unless, you know, we hear of some adverse finding that suddenly appears on the horizon from these.
Is there any specific data on rebound weight gain? Like, like how, is it immediate? They just start gaining weight, or is it?
Well, as I said, you know, the bad press that's already starting to surface is, you know, I lost 50 pounds when I was on it, and then I stopped it, and I, you know, over a very short period of time, I gained my weight back. So, you know, it's hard to tell exactly whether these are true stories and, you know, how bad things are, but I would imagine that if you're taking a drug to lose weight and you're losing weight and then you stop the drug and you gain weight, that's kind of what you might expect. So you are kind of committed, unless you change your behavior dramatically on your own, you're kind of committed to continue using the drugs if you really want to get that weight reduction and, you know, the benefits. Plus, you know, you could see that not only would you be closer to your ideal weight if you use these and they're effective, but think of all these other beneficial features that I told you about. I mean, wouldn't you want to get all of those as well to help? And in your applicant population and your insured block, wouldn't you expect that you're going to have better mortality going forward if, you know, people that you've already taken are starting to use these drugs? I mean, it's kind of like what happened when statins, you know, were, you know, massively used, that we got all the benefit of those and it's still working today in our block. You know, people that are taking statins, things just worked out better. So, you know, that's kind of what I would expect.
Gotcha. Okay, is there a way to differentiate diabetes / weight loss using the dosage amount? Like, oh, this amount is usually used for weight loss and this amount's generally used for diabetes.
Oh, I see what you're saying. That's going to be a very personal, you know, decision based on the doctor that's prescribing it. So I wish I could give you more on that, but you know, I would think that that's going to be, what is your particular circumstance? Are you diabetic, pre-diabetic? What's your weight circumstance? And, you know, what dose is going to work with you? And you don't want any side effects, so you wouldn't want to increase the dose unnecessarily if you were getting the benefit out of a lower dose, right? But as you saw when I talked about Mounjaro here, that at the 15 milligram dose, there were no increased side effects, but you really got an extra kick on the benefits. So that would be helpful. And as I said, no one seems to be having trouble with hypoglycemia, which, you know, is kind of amazing that the Mounjaro does everything you want it to do without, you know, causing hypoglycemia. So it's pretty amazing.
Have any of these been tested on kids? I mean, you see higher obesity in children and teenagers. Do you think we're going to be seeing these in the medical records for kids?
Yeah, as I let me see if I can get back to that slide. Hold on a sec.
Because I saw a couple of them, like Trulicity, I saw a couple of them that were okay for
Yeah,
kids.
yeah, like, yeah, some of the other drugs in the category, kids, it's been approved for kids. It is supposedly approved for 12 plus and older on the Wegovy. So that's impressive. So I would imagine that, kids will be in the future will be more likely to be candidates, but right now it's kind of selective. And for Ozempic, Rybelsus, no, and Mounjaro, no, but yes on Wegovy, which is actually a much bigger dose of Ozempic. So I guess we're heading in that direction, but I don't think they've given the go-ahead completely yet.
Gotcha. And there's a couple of more in-depth part of this. So what's the difference in Ozempic and Wegovy? Is it just how it's marketed? DEM2 versus obesity? Why are MDs prescribing Ozempic for weight loss for non-diabetics when Wegovy is available?
Yeah, the Wegovy is a much bigger dose, as you saw on when I did that. Let me
A
see
little
if I
more
can go back to
intense
that.
on how you have to take it.
Yeah, let me see if I can get back to that particular slide. There we go. So, with Wegovy, you work up to this much bigger dose. And so, you're more likely to get a bigger punch to solve the problem. So tell me your question again. I'm sorry.
Oh, she said Wegovy is pretty much marketed for weight loss, but and Ozempic is more marketed for diabetes. If Wegovy is available for weight loss, then why are they giving them Ozempic?
Yeah, it's the same drug. So it's just with Wegovy, it's marketed as giving a much bigger dose if you work up to the week 17 and onward. So it's the same exact drug, different, you follow a different procedure to get to a larger dose,
And
but
wasn't the Wegovy more expensive?
it's the same drug. Well, I don't know. Well, they were more or
Oh, you
less,
did it on Amazon, but I mean,
yeah, more or less in the same, but people that I guess are going to want to get the maximum, everybody figures that if some works good, then more is better. So getting to the maximum dose on Wegovy, I would assume people think they're going to get the best weight loss for their money, as long as it's not costing, twice or three times as much. So it's exactly the same drug. They just use different names to help with the marketing of it, but it's the same exact injectable drug.
gotcha.
Mounjaro is different. Mounjaro is a different chemical.
Gotcha. And now is the Trulicity and the Victoza and all that stuff the same as the GL that you had on that chart?
No, that's different. Let me go
Those are
back to
different.
that. Yeah, where did
It's a
I
different
have
talk. It's a different talk.
that? Yeah, that's as you'll notice with Trulicity, Victoza, they're different chemicals, structures, and they've been around for a while, but they just haven't had the same appeal and it hasn't seemed to have caught on. So that's why the other drugs that we just talked about today seem to be kind of taking over
Little
and
bit
moving
more,
ahead. Yeah.
little bit more fashionable. Have you heard of this person wanted to know, have you heard of the order in which people eat parts of their meal resulting in different blood sugar levels? I think you had a slide on them. For example, if you're eating your rice before veggies and protein versus after.
Yeah. So I went to the AIM meeting last October, and we had an excellent speaker who talked about, diet and how changing your diet, the way you eat your meal, can affect your own weight loss and also prevent these glucose spikes. So, as I mentioned in my slide, what you don't want to do is eat the carbohydrates first. You want to eat them last. So, if you have any protein in your meal, eat that first, along with veggies that aren't full of carbohydrates. Then eat the carbohydrates, and that'll slow the absorption of the sugars from the carbohydrates. That will not only help you with limiting your glucose spike, but also you may actually demonstrate now you can lose weight better using that style of eating. Now, it seems like a pain in the neck sometimes. And, you know, a lot of times you just want like a bowl of ice cream, which is just going to give you a super high glucose rush. But if you follow the protein and veggies first, then carbohydrate, sugars, you'll get a long-term benefit. This is what, you know, we're told, from doing it that way rather than first thing eating the rice and bread. You know, so some people that have bread before every meal with a little olive oil or something, you know, this is obviously bad news, but you know, I'm just reporting. I don't necessarily always follow the advice I'm giving, but I'm giving you the advice as given to me.
Exactly. We don't always follow the best rules. Most of us know what we should do, and we still don't.
So Jill, I think if anything, anyone is still online, they're probably worn out by now. I think we've worn them out. So
I will, well, I just wanted to make a comment. I'll read you one of these comments. Somebody sent, like that they, have a statement. They just started Ozempic 8 days ago and just did their second shot right before this call. And they're only using it for weight loss, and they don't have any other elevations at all. And, they have some fatigue as well as a small bit of nausea, but nothing terrible. So they're crossing their fingers that this will work.
wow, so that's great.
We
So
have a live attestation. I can't even say it now. Attestation.
that's great. So without knowing who it is, we'll want a full report just anonymously to know how things are
Info
going.
USA, get us. We want to know how this is working. But anyway, thank you everybody for attending. We really appreciate it. Dr. J does a great job. He does, you know, he does requests occasionally. So if you guys have anything that you want to hear, please let us know in the survey. Don't forget to reach out and register for our upcoming claims seminar, our webinar in August. And then of course we have our half-day webinar in October and our full in-person seminar next March. But thank you, and you guys have a really nice rest of your day. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Jill.